Afternoon, everybody. Doing something a little bit different and doing a response video. Everybody's favorite half-Asian chicken farmer from Chicago recently had a guest on, and his guest refused to answer a question that was asked to him repeatedly. Or more specifically, he refused to answer the question in a direct manner. Now, in between saying, look guys, I'm from Chicago, and plugging his chicken farm channel, Tim Pool asked his guest repeatedly why it was so important to more or less legalize the killing of fetuses in abortion legislation, and why it wasn't made clear in the legislation that in the cases of viability, why the doctors were not legally made to make every effort to save the baby, or in the case of partial birth abortions, where viable, why the infant couldn't have simply been induced labor, delivered, and otherwise saved. Now, the man he had on seemed like a decent guy, but he refused to answer this question directly. So, I'm going to pose that question again, as Tim Pool asked it. Why is it so important to legalize the killing of fetuses in democratic legislation? And why is it always absent in all of this legislation that everything must be done to ensure the survival of the child, if possible? So that's the question. I want you to think on it for about 10 seconds. So here's the answer. There are two. One of which is entirely logical, entirely rational, entirely grounded in this physical reality that we find ourselves standing in, and it is very simple. If the political left puts it into their legislation that everything must be done to protect the welfare of the child if the child is viable, or rather if the fetus is viable, depending on your stance, that raises questions. The questions are, why would you do everything you can to save this fetus if it's just a fetus? If it's not a child? And if it is a child, then what's the morality around killing it? That is the political answer. The answer simply is that if the Democrats begin to acknowledge the humanity of the unborn, then their entire argument falls apart. It logically begins to crumble at the very foundation. This is why the kryptonite to every single pro-choice article is basically just asking them, well, where does it start? What's the difference between a baby who's unborn and a baby who's 8 inches up into a womb? What is the difference between a baby who is X amount of weeks versus X amount of weeks versus Y amount of weeks? That sort of questioning just completely demolishes the argument, because it forces the other person to either deny or acknowledge the humanity of the unborn. Now, for the less political answer, why is it so important for the Democrats to legalize the murder of the unborn, or in some cases, recently born, in the case of the American South? It's very simple. Moloch requires sacrifice. Now, for those of you who know, have fun with that. And for those of you who don't know, do some research. You might find it rather enlightening and illuminating, especially about sacrificing chickens in the backyard to Molech, as one rather well-known politician put it in an email. And before anybody goes off and says, oh, it's a joke, it's a joke, it's a joke, it's a rather specific joke, isn't it? To be talking about a older than 10,000-year-old god of child sacrifice in an email. Bit specific. It's a tiny bit suspicious, or as the kids are saying today, a bit sus. Do your own research. And I, for one, think that Tim is a very intelligent man, and honestly, I think that he either knows this himself, or he's simply asking the right questions. So, I want all of you to have a very nice day. I want you to go out, get some sun, get some exercise. I found a lovely little glade for me to do some videos in while I was out stomping around, rescuing turtles and stuff like that. And, well, take care of yourselves. Drink plenty of water. Eat fresh food. For the love of Odin, do not live in the pot and eat the bugs. Unless it's lobster, in which case, have at it. You all have a very nice day.